A very good evening to you. Many thanks for joining us. You are just in time for Business Insight this evening, and we want to bring you up to speed with the latest on matters the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, worldwide, there are about 2,143,000 confirmed cases, with about 143,258 deaths so far, and those who have recovered are 540,067 people. Of course, of those 2,143,000, and 9 of them are Kenyans who have just been confirmed today. Remember, the total for Kenya is 234 deaths. In Africa, there are about 18,659 total cases, 946 deaths total. And in Kenya, just to give you an overview, Egypt there is leading with 2,673 deaths, followed by South Africa at 2,506 cases. And in Kenya, as we've just given you those statistics, we have 234 cases, 9 confirmed cases today, and 11 deaths. That is the latest. We will be bringing you the details of just how it is looking in Kenya, what the government is doing to ensure that the cases are decreasing, the contracting of the new cases. Now, we want to also bring you a story on matters the NYS starting to make about 1 million masks based on a donation from Kenya Pipeline Company. The details of that story and much more are coming up on Business Insight. My name is Betty Kiptum. Here are the highlights.
In the last 24 hours, we have conducted 704 tests, out of which 9 persons have tested positive for coronavirus.
9 more people test positive for coronavirus, bringing the country's total to 234. Kilifi County Deputy Governor Gideon Saburi is released on a 200,000 shillings cash bail after denying to have willfully exposed himself in public while ailing from COVID-19.
We cannot entertain arrogant groups to continue harassing the members of public. Police are there to protect mwananchi, and police are there to enforce the laws of this country.
And those flouting COVID-19 prevention measures to face the force of the law. Welcome to the broadcast. Lucy Moura is my colleague on the sign language interpretation. Now we get started with the COVID-19 status update, and 9 more people have tested positive for COVID-19, bringing the country's total to 234. This was from 704 samples tested in the preceding 24 hours. While making the announcement, President Uhuru Kenyatta noted that the measures instituted by the government had limited the spread of the disease on a larger scale and sternly warned those found breaching them. And as Purity Museo reports, the head of state also directed the Ministry of Health and that of Public Service to develop a welfare package to cushion medical officers, noting that they are the country's frontline soldiers in the war against the pandemic.
Exactly 1 month, 3 days since the first case of COVID-19 was reported in Kenya, the numbers stand at 234 after 9 more people tested positive in the last 24 hours.
In the last 24 hours, we have conducted 704 tests, out of which 9 persons have tested positive for coronavirus. In that regard, the total number of persons who have tested positive now stands at 234. Fortunately for us, 53 persons have also turned negative and been discharged from hospital. We have lost 11 persons to this disease.
President Uhuru Kenyatta appreciated that the measures taken by the government, such as curfew, The partial lockdown and social distancing had limited the spread of the virus, but took a swipe at law enforcement officers and members of the public whose actions were undermining such measures.
Any officer who breaches his duty to implement the measures against the pandemic will be met with the harshest of sanction. In the same breath, I also want to condemn in the strongest way possible those of us who can assault or interfere with law enforcement officers doing their job.
The head of state was optimistic that Kenya was headed in the right direction in the war against the virus, but urging Kenyans not to put down their guard as the mass testing exercise, in which Kenya's capacity had grown exponentially, could prove otherwise.
The measures that we took are firm and indeed have been impactful. The nighttime curfew and the banning of travel in and out of the areas that have the most infections are indeed limiting the ability of the disease to be transmitted at a great scale.
To cushion frontline medical officers, President Uhuru Kenyatta has directed formation of a welfare package to cover the frontline healthcare providers.
I am today directing the Ministry of Public Service and the Ministry of Health to develop a welfare package to cushion these frontline officers, especially during this challenging time.
The president further commended Kenyans for their innovativeness, such as the 16 Kenyatta University students who innovated a ventilator. Purity Museo, Channel 1 News.
Still on that update, President Uhuru Kenyatta has announced that county governments will receive 5 billion shillings from the national government to supplement their ongoing war against the COVID-19 pandemic. The head of state has further directed the Kenya Medical Supplies Agency to facilitate counties with access to locally sourced face masks and other personal protective equipment through a 3-month waiver of requirements for purchase. The president says counties remain integral in efforts to defeat the global pandemic that is the coronavirus.
With the latest statistics indicating that the coronavirus is now spreading in counties, President Uhuru Kenyatta has moved to arm the devolved units with more arsenal to help combat the virus.
The national government will also support the county's response to the coronavirus crisis with an additional 5 billion shillings that will supplement the savings that the counties have generated. These monies will be devoted specifically to cushion the most vulnerable people and to protect our healthcare workers.
The president appearing to also provide a solution to the push by governors to have counties seek alternative source of medical supplies.
I am directing that county governments receive a 3-month waiver from the Kenya Medical Supply Agency requirement for the purchase of masks and PPEs to protect our citizens and healthcare workers from infection. This waiver applies to sourcing of these products locally.
The head of state also announced that the government will be lending a helping hand through the disbursement of a weekly COVID-19 support stipend to needy households in Nairobi.
The piloting of the program started yesterday, and some of the initial beneficiaries have received their stipend.
8.5 billion shillings has also been released to the cash transfer program to support the elderly across the country. 500 million shillings in arrears has also been released by the government to help persons living with severe disabilities. Noting that close to 1 billion shillings has been raised through the COVID-19 Emergency Response Fund, President Kenyatta urged Kenyans to continue supporting one another to help mitigate the effects of coronavirus.
Moving on, Kilifi County Deputy Governor Gideon Saburi has been released on a 200,000 shillings cash bail after denying a charge of willfully exposing himself in public while ailing from the COVID-19, contrary to the Public Health Act of 2017. Mombasa Principal Magistrate Elvis Micheka also ordered Saburi to deposit his travel documents with the court as he proceeds on 14 days self-quarantine.
It's a sigh of relief for Kilifi County Deputy Governor Gideon Saburi after the Mombasa Law Court released him on a 200,000 shillings cash bail with an alternative bond of $500,000 shillings. Saburi is, however, not out of the woods yet after he was ordered to self-quarantine for another 14 days. Principal Magistrate Elvis Michieka further directed Saburi to surrender his passport and not to interfere with investigations. The case will be mentioned on 5th May 2020.
The accused person is therefore granted bail on the following terms. Number one, the accused may be released upon deposit into court of cash bail in the sum of 200,000 or post a bond of 500,000 with one surety of like amount. The accused to self-quarantine for 14 days from today's date at his house within Mombasa as prescribed by his doctor on his discharge from hospital on the 3rd of April 2020, and thereafter comply with the government directives on self-distancing.
Elsewhere, the National Council on the Administration of Justice has announced new operation measures to safeguard the health of judicial workers and the public. In a meeting held on Thursday, it was resolved that all suspects will be arraigned within 24 hours of arrest except in cases where they have been released on police bond. Hearing of criminal appeals by the High Court and Court of Appeal will be scaled up effective 21st April 2020. Hearing of civil matters will be scaled up by 22nd of April 2020. The council, led by Chief Justice David Maraga, will meet on Tuesday next week to review the steps taken to implement the resolutions. And finally, Police Constable Emmanuel Oyombe, who was arrested in connection with the murder of University of Leeds student Carlton David Maina in Kibera, Nairobi, will remain in police custody for 7 more days. Oyombe was arraigned before High Court Judge Ngenye Masharia on murder charges, but did not take plea after the prosecution informed the court that he had to undergo a mental assessment first. Justice Masharia directed he be taken to Mathare Hospital for the assessment and the case be mentioned on April 23, 2020. Oyombe was arrested by DCI detectives on Wednesday after the Independent Policing Oversight Authority (IPOA) concluded investigations into the murder which happened in the year 2018. Reporting for Channel 1 News, I'm Ben Troy Njoe.
Now, the Inspector General of Police, Hilary Mutyambai, has condemned the attack on a police officer in Malindi by border operators who were resisting enforcement of national government's directive on COVID-19. According to Mutyambai, who was in Mombasa, the force of law will apply to anyone downplaying measures on social distance, partial lockdowns and movement restrictions.
The police have issued a stern warning to anyone failing to adhere to the Ministry of Health directives on the fight against COVID-19. Inspector General of Police Hilary Mutyambai says his team will not relent on ensuring the measures are followed to the letter.
People are defying these directives.
While in Mombasa, Mutyambai said the directives are part of the measures that have been instituted by the government to help fight the pandemic and are in the interest of the nation. The Inspector General condemned an attack on a police officer in Malindi by boda operators.
We cannot entertain arrogant groups to continue harassing the members of public in defiance of the law, including what happened on Tuesday, on 14th in Malindi. I wanted to bring this one to the attention of Kenyans, that police are there to protect mwananchi and police are there to enforce the laws of this country.
The officer was allegedly ambushed by the operators as he was enforcing the lockdown.
There were some officers sustained injuries from this attack.
He further advised Kenyans to follow the right procedure in having their grievances addressed if they feel aggrieved by the police.
We have laid down channels which are supposed to be communicated, and actions will be taken accordingly depending on the investigation of those issues.
Irene Mchuma Odim, Channel 1.
And a young man from Kitui County is going the extra mile using his artistic gift to sensitize the local community on the COVID-19 pandemic. David Munyao, a self-trained artist, is using street art to educate the public on the importance of adhering to preventive measures issued by the government to contain the spread of the novel coronavirus.
David Munyao is a young man on a mission. The 22-year-old, who hails from Mulango Ward in Kitui Central, found solace in painting 4 years ago after finishing his secondary education.
Sababu ya challenges za fee na background vile iko kwa sijakuwa able kujoin. So nikaona hali vile iko na sababu na talent ya art and I knew that kutoka kitambo nikaamua kufanya art.
He has since perfected his craft to incorporate street art, and now in the wake of coronavirus outbreak that causes COVID-19, Munyao has taken his art to a new level. A walk on some of the streets in Kitui town reveals some of his work, painting and drawing artistically to communicate the significance of preventive measures.
Nikaona ni muhimu si kama artists na nikijua sana we are part of the society, nikaona we have to do something on this. So we are creating awareness through our arts. So tunaenda tunachapa art yenye ina sensitize, yenye ina create awareness to the locals. Tunachapa kwa lugha ya Wakamba ama area yenye place wase wako.
Because of his passion for art, Munyao caters for all expenses involved to get the message across.
Na buy paints, naita mavijana wenye wako area, tunachapa art. So this is a passion. Na nimeona as an artist, we have a part in this. So because of this passion, hata nikikosa pesa, we have to do it.
On the walls he has painted are messages of hope which the country and indeed the whole world needs to overcome the deadly pandemic. Kamche Menza for Channel 1 News.
That's the good stuff. We like those. Now to more good stuff. Kisii University has embarked on the production of affordable face masks to prevent the spread of coronavirus. Kisii University Vice Chancellor Professor John Akama said the initiative, which is under the institution's corporate social responsibility, will see thousands of face masks donated to the county governments, informal transport providers and ordinary residents for free.
The face mask manufactured by Kisii University will be reusable and could save thousands of residents from the pain of buying them on a daily basis. Kisii University Vice Chancellor Professor John Akama decried the high cost of face masks in Kisii County, saying it worked against the efforts to fight the COVID-19 pandemic.
We are going to give them to the county government of Kisii, Nyamira, and even other neighboring counties like Migori, so that they are given to the health workers and even to the common Kenyans, like particularly the boda riders and also the ladies, mama mbogas.
Meanwhile, Nyandarua County government has proposed a budget of 800 million shillings to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. County Finance Executive Mary Mugwanja said that the funds are to put up an ultra-modern 10-bed capacity ICU at JM Memorial Hospital in Olkalau.
We're yet to finalize that because there is a mapping that is ongoing at the national government. There are a lot of donor funds that are coming through the main National COVID Response Committee. So we are actually awaiting to see how much will you be able to get from the national government to enable us to supplement the difference.
This Isiolo County Commissioner Hamad Shambi moved to allay fears that a group of people who had allegedly escaped from quarantine in Mandera County had found their way into Isiolo. Shambi noted that the information that has been doing rounds on social media on the alleged escape was a hoax.
Jana kumekuwa na tetesi kwamba kuna gari ilipita hapa imekuja hapa Isiolo ikiwa imebeba watu wa karantini kutoka huko Mandera. Nataka kusema si hivyo. Hii gari tumetafuta na tumeipata. One of our senior officers ambaye alikuwa ametoka leave, of course alikuwa off nyumbani.
And the Rotary International, in conjunction with the government, has moved to the rescue of hundreds of starving families in Naivasha by offering them relief food. Under the program, over 600 families, mainly in informal centers around the town, will receive food items to last them for 2 weeks. While Homa Bay Women Representative Gladys Wanga, in partnership with the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, has launched an initiative of producing washable face masks to cushion the county residents from the COVID-19 infections. Wanga said they intend to produce 20,000 masks in the next 20 days that will be distributed to residents free of charge. Finally, a doctor in Meru County has donated sanitizers, soaps for hand wash, water tanks, face masks and gloves as a way of preventing infection of the COVID-19. While distributing the preventative equipment, Dr. Shadrach Mwiti called on any individual who want to support the community to come out on board. Ben Chumba, reporting for Channel 1 News.
As countries continue implementing stronger measures to contain the spread of the novel coronavirus, self-quarantine and the temporary closing of businesses has adversely affected the food service industry and directly impacted the nutrition of populations. Tonight on our coronavirus fact sheet, we uncover the connection between undernutrition and COVID-19 disease.
Now, coming to nutrition, the first thing we need to ensure is that even when there is no food, children are protected, because if children do not have food for 1 or 2 days, they are likely to go down very fast and even die. The other group that we need to look at are also the aged. As we say, the aged are more vulnerable. They need to feed well. All of us need to feed well, as we always say. That means we need to have a variety of foods, the vegetables, the fruits, the starchy foods, the animal protein, and even plant protein, so that our bodies are able to resist any disease.
And 6 children from different snake-prone areas in Baringo County have been admitted in Baringo Referral Hospital following snake bites. The kids are currently receiving treatment following the fatal bite from the venomous snakes.
The children from Tiati and Baringo North sub-counties are currently admitted in the hospital following snake bites. The snakes have become rampant due to the lack of water in the region, forcing the reptiles to look for water in homesteads. Anne Washira, a grandmother to one of the victims, said that her grandchild was bitten by the snake while asleep at night and had to rush the 3-year-old to hospitals miles away in Kapturo, Baringo North.
Katika eneo hilo tumepata shida nyingi kuhusiana na majeraha ya nyoka. Na kuna kama miaka mitatu iliyopita tulipoteza kijana mmoja wa kidato cha pili, mwanafunzi wa Sacho.
Elsewhere in Muranga, over 20 homesteads have been affected by mudslides that occurred at Gacharu and Gitau villages of Kiharu constituency. Some of those affected have sought shelter from their lucky neighbors. The mudslides occurred after heavy rains pounded the area last night. And a family in Khayega village, Kakamega County, is mourning the death of their kin, who allegedly died in the hands of the police. The 58-year-old man is said to have been arrested and beaten to death by police officers who are reinforcing the dusk to dawn curfew.
Haya ni mambo ambayo sisi tutazidi kuendelea hivi mpaka tupate majibu ni nani waliomuua huyu. Na intakana hawa polisi wote watolewa hapa Khayega, tuletewe polisi wengine ambao watakuwa na heshima na wananchi.
In Mwingi Central Kitui County, police are detaining a man suspected to have been involved in the murder of a middle-aged man whose body was found dumped in a ditch and his body parts mutilated. Residents made the discovery near Mangoloma River and alerted the police, who identified the deceased as Francis Mutisia Kitondu. In another development, a woman in Milimani village, Likuyani constituency in Kakamega County, is seeking justice after she was evicted from her home in a land dispute with a neighboring school. Susan Mukanda says her nightmare began in 2015 when she sold part of her land to the Board of Management of Ishikulu Girls Secondary School, only for the institution to later claim ownership of the remaining piece of land.
I sold to them 2 acres, but they fraudulently acquired 2.6 acres. Yesterday, they came and fenced off. I cannot access my premise.
My mom had decided to sell this land in good faith, but the way she's being treated and the way things are turning out, it doesn't look like justice is being served.
And finally, Wajir County leaders have called on the national government to beef up security in the area following the killing of 6 locals by the Al-Shabaab militia early this week.
We came here to thank the community for the swift action they have taken yesterday evening and killed the 4 Al-Shabaab.
The leaders at the same time rooted for the enlisting of more national police reservists to complement police efforts in flashing the terror group. Reporting for Channel 1 News, I'm Timothy Kipnusu.
That story by Timothy Kipnusu brings us to our first break here on Business Insight, but don't go too far. We'll be back with more.
Coronavirus COVID-19 is a respiratory virus spreading across the world. The infection is spread from droplets of coughing and sneezing of an infected person, touching or shaking hands, or being in contact with contaminated surfaces or objects with the virus. The signs and symptoms are fever, coughing, headache, body ache, difficulty in breathing. The disease can be prevented by regularly washing hands with soap and running water. Avoid close contact with people who have flu-like symptoms. Avoid handshake, hugs, and kissing. Also, protect yourself by covering your mouth or nose using a disposable tissue while coughing or sneezing. If you experience these symptoms and you had traveled or been in contact with a person from a country reporting COVID-19, you should isolate yourself for 14 days. Dial *719# or call 719. This message has been brought to you by the Government of Kenya and its partners.
Next on.
Waislamu basi wamtegemee nani? Allah, kutokamana na mambo yao yote. Fanya bidii katika kazi yako, shughuli zako, kisha unamweka Mungu mbele, kisha unamtawakali Allah. Hiyo ndio imani ya muumini. Ya ilahi anta jahi.
Kuna misiba ya aina tofauti na huwafikia waja wa aina tofauti kwa minajili tofauti. Kama vile manabii walipata misiba yao ambayo ilikuwa kuhusiana na imani zao na ukweli ambao walikuwa wamewafikishia binadamu.
On the next episode of Behind Closed Doors.
Sign. Orlando, come here. Emilio! You have to eat. What do you want, to get sick?
That would be the best thing.
Pilar?
Here I am, Ignacia. Here I am, honey.
Ignacia. I saw her yesterday. She's alive, Javier.
Welcome back. You are watching Business Insight. Now let's do the business. The National Youth Service has started production of 1 million masks to be distributed among vulnerable Kenyans at no cost. The masks will be produced at a cost of 55 shillings each, which has been covered by 55 million shillings donated by the Kenya Pipeline Company. Petroleum Principal Secretary Andrew Kamau says the Kenya Pipeline Company has so far produced and distributed 370,000 litres of sanitizer to vulnerable Kenyans. The government has recommended a raft of measures aimed at containing the spread of coronavirus in the country, such as wearing of face masks in public places, such as PSVs, supermarkets, open-air markets and crowded places. However, some Kenyans have said they cannot afford to buy the face masks. This has prompted the government to utilize part of the cash donated by the Kenya Pipeline Company to manufacture 1 million face masks that will be distributed to vulnerable Kenyans.
The National Youth Service is going to produce 55,000 masks per day. The factory you see behind us is able to do about 30,000 pieces per day. And we are going to move to Naivasha also, where we are also going to get another 20,000 being produced per day.
But what criteria would be used to point out who benefits from the free masks?
We are not going to be selling these masks. These masks will be distributed, like the DG has said, to people at the front lines who require it, whether it's the police, whether it's our own people, National Youth Service, who are involved in the transportation of people from one place to another, especially in the quarantine area. And maybe in the end, perhaps we can even start looking at border if there are enough of them.
Petroleum Principal Secretary Andrew Kamau further says there is need to support local industries as the country battles the coronavirus pandemic.
We need to develop our own industries. We have to support our own industries. And the people who will be trained here, who are being trained here, will go on to work in other places, perhaps even start their own businesses where they will be manufacturing or making various things.
He says production of 2 billion shillings worth of hand sanitizers by the Kenya Pipeline Company is ongoing.
It's mostly going to the informal sectors. We've also given Matatu associations. We've given the Council of Governors, which we made a presentation to the chairman of the Council of Governors. I think it was 3 weeks ago. So they have getting 20,000 liters every week. So far we have produced about 600,000 liters of sanitizer, and we have another 400,000 to go.
The new initiative by the National Youth Service accommodates the youth in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic.
We are going to play a big role also in terms of giving back to the society in terms of using our youth. There are so many people who have been asking, where are the youth? So part of the youth that are going to work here are the youths of Kenya.
To matters agriculture now, tea farmers who market the produce through the Kenya Tea Development Agency will be paid 50% of the delivery monthly, with the rest paid as bonus annually. This, in addition to allowing individual tea factories to sell the produce directly at the tea auction, is among a raft of measures that have been effected by the government to streamline the tea value chain. As Benson Rioba reports, the farmers were previously being paid by KTDA factories 14 to 16 shillings per kilo monthly, with the bulk of the money paid as bonus in October.
In a move that is likely to lessen the grip of Kenya Tea Development Agency on the country's tea sector, the government has announced new tea regulations that, among other things, will see tea factories in the country auction their tea independently. Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya accused some tea marketers of exploiting farmers through price fixing, calling for automation of the tea auction in the next 2 months for accountability.
Envisioning a situation where other people can be licensed to open a tea auction. It shouldn't be an exclusive one system, because the existing one has not served farmers very well.
On payments, small-scale farmers who market their produce through KTDA will have to receive at least 50% of tea sale produce in a month, with a balance paid as bonus.
Factory limited companies shall, within 30 days from receipt of proceeds from the sale of tea, pay tea growers at least 50% of payment for green leaf delivered every month.
Buyers of the green leaf will have to deposit a down payment of 10%, with the balance paid before export of the purchase consignment. In turn, factories are required to pay farmers 30 days after receiving the auction proceeds.
14 days after the sale, once the money has been paid to the broker must remit that money directly to the company, not through the management agent. It is directly to the company, so that this money is not put in deposit earning accounts and used as as collateral for all sorts of things.
To reduce conflict of interest, a single broker will only represent 15 factories at the tea auction.
Brokers that are already in operation shall continue with their business uninterrupted until the tenure of their registration is due for renewal.
The government will further procure services of individuals with experience on the best tea practices as it seeks to further streamline the tea value chain. Benson Rioba reporting for Channel 1 Business.
Thank you, Benson Rioba, for that report. Kenya Airways has decided to temporarily convert 4 passenger aircrafts to cargo flights by refurbishing the interior to tap high demand for cargo business. On Thursday morning, Kenya Airways dispatched a Boeing 787 Dreamliner passenger aircraft from Nairobi to London, loaded with 40 tons of fresh produce as part of initiatives to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on the national carrier's operations.
Countries have restricted movement in their territories, which has negatively impacted operations of airlines, which have either drastically reduced frequencies on most routes or halted their flights. This has resulted in most carriers grounding their aircrafts, which still have to be maintained, pushing up costs for airlines. In recent days, some countries have been easing movement restrictions, which, coupled with demand for cargo freight service, is offering hope to airlines like Kenya Airways.
Crisis, unfortunately, has brought everything to pretty much a standstill. We've been quarantining at home, but for today, or for this time, we are able to continue with cargo transport, which is what we'll be doing today.
The national carrier has now opted to convert 4 passenger aircrafts to cargo flights by modifying the interior. As part of the initiative, Kenya Airways on Thursday morning dispatched a Boeing 787 Dreamliner passenger aircraft from Nairobi to London, loaded with 40 tons of fresh produce.
It's actually a passenger aircraft. We have converted it now into a freighter because of the crisis. Yeah. So we make sure that people get their food and all that. It's going to take us about 8 hours, approximately 8 hours, maybe. Yeah. We do not exceed the limits. Yeah. What we have on the seats here is basically the same weight, passenger weight. We don't exceed that. So that after the crisis, we'll still need this aircraft to carry our passengers.
The airline hopes cargo business will help it reduce the impact of COVID-19 on its operations. The biggest task for the carrier now is to ensure that the cabin crew are in good medical condition by conducting checkups periodically during the flight duration. This comes after a Kenya Airways pilot who flew the last passenger aircraft from New York to Nairobi died after reportedly contracting coronavirus.
So what we are doing in the morning, the briefing is called a medical briefing on COVID, and mostly it's on personal protective equipment. Mostly we have to do the medical checkups on ground to make sure that they have nobody has any elevated temperature, because temperature is the first signs when you have or infected on COVID. But before they came here, we had done all of them the tests to make sure that they are okay and they are safe.
Fiona Shuru, Channel 1 Business News.
Now, the restriction of fast food joints and restaurants to takeaway services has hurt local chicken farmers the hardest, as demand for birds has drastically reduced. Some farmers claim the situation has been made worse by cheaper chicken imports from neighboring countries.
The government announced a number of measures aimed at containing the spread of coronavirus. Among the measures were social distancing in public places and closure of all bars, and restricting fast food joints and restaurants to only offer takeaway services.
Most of the people who buy our products are not able to now buy from us, since they also do not know where to sell it, since most hotels now are closed. Most restaurants are closed, so you find butcheries also are not taking so much.
Since March, since COVID, we were forced to cut our production to half. And even then, after cutting the production to half, we've been forced to sell our chicken at half what we would have sold in any other ordinary day.
According to local chicken farmers, this has resulted in a drastic reduction in demand for the birds.
We've not been able to sell our chicken, so we are forced to have some in storage, also sell some for home consumptions, direct to the consumer. And as you can see, we are still holding quite a number in the farm.
Poultry business is more of credit business. If it's the chicks, if it's the feeds, most farmers you'll find either if we're buying our chicks cash, we'll buy our feeds on credit. So also the people who now give us feeds are not willing to provide that feeds on credit, because at the end of the day also the market out there is not so good.
The countrywide dusk to dawn curfew, coupled with travel restrictions in Nairobi, Mombasa, Kilifi and Kwale, has worsened the situation.
We cleared our last crop in March, and it was really hard in getting the market for it. So what we did, once we cleared, we decided we won't put any more stock because now of the uncertainty of the future, and now we are just holding on and waiting.
Local farmers further claim that cheap imports from neighboring countries was further aggravating the situation.
When we have chicks coming from Uganda, we have been forced to compete at a very unreasonable rates. That affecting what time we sell our chicken, how we penetrate the market, and at what prices.
This comes even as the Kenya Poultry Breeders Association has projected a massive shortage of chicken and eggs supply in coming months due to a decline in day-old chicks placement over the past 3 weeks.
Remember, you can get in touch with us on our social media platforms at KBC Channel 1 and at Betty Kiptum on Twitter. Now on Twitter, Ford Kimungui, you're saying you're watching from Likuyani Sango. Thank you very much. And Kevin Aderi as well, you are watching. Now, speaking of online, during this time that you have been staying at home, have you been purchasing more online? Have you gotten to the digital apps and purchased something, maybe food? Has it been sanitizers? Do you want to know just how the trends are looking? I spoke with Sam Shapat, the Chief Executive Officer of Jumia Kenya, and that interview will be coming right up. But first, we take a short break.
The Juakari operators and others, our saloonists, our mamboga, our barbers, our economy to a large extent depends on you. We cannot allow Kenyans to die because of non-distancing in any sector. So those of you who are carrying out the hair-cutting business in barbershops, in saloons, I am appealing to you today. Ensure that social distancing, fumigation of your working places, masks are used at all times. Just assume that everybody is positive and now deal with that situation. Participation of our citizens in the fight against the disease would be our key success factor.
Kijana ni kusikia unasikia ama usikii? Nimesema kina Tracy wanaishi huko karibu na kwenyu. Toka hapo uende, mimi ndio naishi hapa.
So, wewe unaniitia Tracy ama
kijana? Kusikia ndio unasikia ama usikii? Toka hapo uende, mimi ndio naishi hapa.
Unaweza je transfer mtoto wangu shule, atunampeleka private school. Kazi unafanya itakuruhusu kulipa hiyo fee?
Hapo kwa fee?
No. Chama amekata na ball yangu. Unajua hiyo ball nimependa. The next time I'm talking usijaribu kuniintrude. Umesikia? Toka hapa. Tufungulie. Please. Tufungulie.
The COVID-19 pandemic has forced many Kenyans to stay at home and also work from home. This has made many start ordering things online if they have not been, and the numbers seem to have gone up. To just give us an overview of what is happening in the e-commerce industry amid the pandemic is Sam Shapat, the Chief Executive Officer at Jumia Kenya. Welcome.
Thank you, Bessie.
What are the numbers looking like right now?
The numbers are good. I think what we're seeing is the acceleration of people moving online through this. People want to stay home, they want to stay safe, but they still need to get the products that they need, the essential products that they need. And so they're using online platforms like Jumia to get access to those products, to order directly from the big manufacturers, to order from supermarkets, to order fresh produce, and to get those delivered to them at home.
Okay. Before we look at the commodities that are moving, would you say that the numbers of people living on your platform has risen in the recent past?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit disrupted right now because right now you don't have total lockdown, right? In many countries, in many parts of the world, we have total lockdown. And that's when, e-commerce is kind of the default option. So right now in Kenya, we kind of have a halfway house, right? People are working from home, people don't want to travel, but they can still move around. So we see good numbers, but not complete explosive numbers for online shopping right now.
And what is moving currently? Remember when people were told to stay at home, there was quite some panic buying in most retail stores. Yeah. Did this reflect also on the e-commerce platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what we've seen move a lot has been all of the basics. So sort of your ungas, your sugars, your water. People are staying at home and ordering those to come to them. We've also seen on our platform Jumia Food big order growth from supermarkets like Carrefour. So people are staying at home and doing their shopping at the big supermarkets on Jumia as well. So we've seen big demand for that, and we saw on particular days where the big announcements came through, we saw big order volumes on those days.
And of course, apart from Jumia Food, are people ordering other things like groceries, and are there any new innovations that you've had to come up with, so to say, to cater for the demand?
It's evolving every day. I think every day there's like different changes. What we're seeing is, we've seen, for example, big demand for sanitizer. And so a couple of weeks ago, we were working very, very hard with the manufacturers to increase the supply of sanitizers. And now you can buy, we have 50, 100,000 sanitizers sitting, ready to distribute to customers every couple of weeks. So we've worked very hard to make sure we have the supply of the goods that people need. Other innovations have come around, creating standardized boxes for people. People want to have one delivery and one click ordering. And so we've been working with partners to create boxes like chakula boxes and fresh boxes that are starting to come online with Jumia. We've got a partnership with Twiga, which is coming through. So we're going to get very affordable fresh food. So your tomatoes, your onions, your potatoes, very affordably are going to be available on Jumia and Jumia Food soon.
Right. At the time when you say the demand for sanitizers was pretty high, did you get to a point where you had to limit any numbers, or it was just open?
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things that we were very keen on right from the beginning is limiting the number of units you can order as a customer. We want to make sure that every household in Kenya can get one, and so we were limiting to 2 units per household on sanitizers and other key products to try and avoid this sort of hoarding behavior. We've also put in place protection for price inflation. So we've been actively reviewing the prices of products on the platform and delisting vendors who a minority of vendors will try and take advantage of the situation.
Okay. Right, and you mentioned around 100,000 sanitizers in stock right now. That is for sanitizers. What is there the capacity? Do you have the capacity to meet the demand for all these other products, specifically logistics?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, Jumia's network is a marketplace, right? So all the different providers, whether it be Posta, Fargo, Sendi, or all the small independent boda groups, could all plug into our platform, and that makes the platform very scalable. And so when we can deal with these big spikes of demand, and I think we will continue to evolve. As the need emerges, we want to be as useful as possible. And so we're thinking through different models so that if we have to help, for example, distribute food into Korangare or like other different areas, that we're ready to do so.
Right. And there's been quite some concern of how people will survive in case there's a lockdown. Yeah. Do you think that the industry is ready to play its part? Because it will be quite big if that lockdown happens for the industry to make sure that they meet the demand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think actually it's been very exciting over the last couple of weeks as all the different industry players actually get together through projects like Safe Hands and others to plan for that, to think through, okay, how would we help at big scale distribute food or essential products, particularly into the high density, lower income areas.
For the people who want to access these particular services, there is of course the issue of safety, the safety of these products. They are being handled by a number of people before they get to them. What are you doing to ensure that the virus is not transferred or transmitted in the process of delivery?
We're taking it very seriously. The good news is that the WHO says that e-commerce orders are safe. Right, because they're being moved from different places over time, that actually the virus doesn't get transmitted on the package. So that's point number one. What we're doing about it is, number one, we're making sure that all of our teams are safe. So you see today, this is our head office, most people are working from home that can work from home. The second thing is all of our essential services teams that are dealing with packages or in our warehouse or delivering to customers all have PPE gear, so they've got masks, they've got gloves, they've been trained on how to use sanitizers, etc. So we're looking after our people as number one, right? So that they stay healthy and safe. And we have regular checks with thermometers and everything else there. Then we're doing regular cleaning of all surfaces in all of our facilities to make sure that everything is in good shape. And so the combination of those things, plus contactless and cashless delivery, which is what we've rolled out at scale now.
Have you experienced any shortages of supply? Because the Fresh Food, Fresh Vegetables Consortium was saying that farmers have the produce, but they are not getting to the market.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think what we've seen for our logistics as well, which I imagine is quite similar to theirs as well, is it's the uncertainty that comes about with the rolling out of these new policy decisions. So I think the government's been very proactive, actually, at taking these steps, and it's trying to find the delicate balance between keeping the economy going whilst rolling out the measures to slow down the spread of the virus. It's quite a difficult thing. I think what happens as a business is when those changes come about is you're trying to figure out what does it mean in practice, you're testing and learning, and it takes a couple of days to stabilize. We've found that for our business. Actually, for our business, it's been relatively uninterrupted so far. And I think we will continue to work with all of the suppliers, such as the farmers, etc., to get produce to market.
There was a concern that many people are eating unhealthy things when they're staying at home, Do you see, based on the numbers, the orders that are there, do you see that happening?
Unfortunately, today, restaurants can't do dinner, right? So all restaurants are closed for dinner today, which is a big part of their income. It's about 50-60% of their revenue as the restaurant industry, if they can't do the night shift. They could do it and do home delivery, I think, and do it very safely, but today they're not allowed to. And what does that mean? It means that people aren't eating out. People are largely cooking at home, which is probably healthier.
It is healthier.
Probably healthier, yeah.
But you said that, of course, you have fresh foods that are being delivered, and you're working with people like Twiga Foods. The demand is there?
Yeah, I mean, we're just starting. This is quite new for us, so we're just starting to roll out this fresh stuff. I think the demand's going to be very big because I think when you take out a lot of middlemen, Twiga work with small farmers, smallholder farmers directly, and so I have access to very affordable and very affordable goods and very efficient supply chains, which means little wastage. And so we can get these bundles, these baskets, to families very affordably.
From the COVID-19 pandemic, of course, some industries have just gotten a shot in the arm, like the e-commerce industry. What does this mean for the industry moving forward?
I think it's potentially very exciting. Potentially because, we hope that the government's going to maintain the current policy, which is that e-commerce is an essential service and it helps get essential goods to people so that they can stay home and stay safe. Right now, that's all well and good. So no issues there. If that policy was to change, that would kill the industry overnight. But right now, it's quite exciting. It's quite exciting because it means that people that have never purchased online are starting to consider it, starting to explore, starting to test. And if we as an industry can do a good job at delivering on their expectations and fighting every day to continue to find the supply which gets harder and harder through these days, then yeah, I think we can see the kind of jumps that we've seen in other parts of the world over this period, which will be amazing for the digital economy of Kenya long term and the president's digital blueprint agenda.
The e-commerce industry largely depends on online orders, of course. Yeah. What is the industry doing to ensure that people's data is safe? Because there are some people who don't shop online because they don't feel their ATM information is going to be safe.
I mean, the ATM information is just one payment. So your card details is one payment option you have, right? You can use your M-Pesa, you can pay on delivery. So it's really the same as any transaction offline as well, right? When you go to a supermarket and you pay with your M-Pesa or with a card, it's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. And so we have very secure processes that live up to all of the international standards to keep people's data safe. And then as a customer, for many customers, you have the option of paying on delivery with M-Pesa if you choose to.
There is an advantage that we have here.
Yeah, absolutely. M-Pesa is a huge thing. And so people don't need to use cards if they don't want to. But if they want to, they have the card facilities there for them as well.
Internationally, there is the issue of cargo space. Many people have been complaining that as much as cargo is still allowed to just traverse countries, there is not enough cargo space. Yeah. Could this be affecting the e-commerce industry as well internationally? Of course, locally it's booming, but what happens internationally?
Yeah, I mean, it could do. I mean, again, a lot of products that are sold full stop, whether it be in the offline markets, whether it's in supermarkets or in online, a lot of those come into the country, right? And so for those goods, yeah, potentially there's some disruption there. And I think for a while, when China was sort of closing down, that did interrupt the flow of goods. China has picked back up and is largely open for business now. And so that helps with the imports of goods. It's quite a good opportunity for the Kenyan manufacturers to step up and fill the gap, which is really exciting from the perspective of job creation locally, as we have done, for example, with the production of masks. And we remain very committed to supporting those businesses over this period as well. But yeah, it is a risk. It is a risk, and but I think the advantage of the online industry and the e-commerce industry is we have thousands of suppliers. I mean, Jumia has 15,000 people selling or businesses selling in Kenya alone, and so if one vendor is out of stock, someone else is going to have stock, and that's really important because it means a continuity of supply for the benefit of customers.
Right. Many businesses have been forced to close shop, especially people who depend on physical, just the market coming back to them. What is the position of the online industry now for those businesses? Because you still need to ensure that you're selling.
Yeah, I think it's a really good opportunity for entrepreneurs and for businesses as well. And we're actually seeing this a lot as well. We're seeing people who used to be selling in physical shops or used to be selling through supermarkets are seeing that their normal business is not doing so well, and so are rapidly moving to selling online. And they're setting up on e-commerce companies like Jumia, and they're starting to sell to customers all over the country. So that's quite exciting for the industry long term as well, because through this process, those people that have been in malls that are now empty are rapidly starting to sell online. And so we're seeing that actually big time. So we're seeing big shopping malls coming to us and saying, hey, come and help our tenants sell online and reach customers to help them with their sales. We're seeing big businesses and lots of small businesses that previously were not selling online coming to us to say, hey, help us get online. Right. And that's not only in Nairobi, it's also like across the rest of the country as well, like smaller supermarkets that want help, for example, to set up home delivery services. So all of those types of businesses should reach out actively to Jumia to come and get selling with us.
Right. For the entrepreneurs maybe who have not been online before, what would your advice be for them as they now take up that challenge?
I'd say number one, get set up. So it takes a matter of minutes to set up on Jumia and start selling on Jumia. That's number one. And the number two is think about the products people need. And you're quite right, some suppliers are going to be going out of stock for periods of time on key products. How can you plug that gap? How can you, find the products people need and bring them online to sell to customers countrywide?
What does the future of the e-commerce industry look like? Of course, during this time of the COVID-19 pandemic and even beyond that.
I think it really depends how it plays out. So I think if e-commerce is allowed to continue to operate as an essential service, I think the future is bright. I think it's very exciting. I think people will start to learn to go online through necessity. And therefore we'll see a big jump in the penetration of e-commerce, which is going to stay. And that's going to create big opportunities for all of the entrepreneurs and manufacturers that are selling online. And it's going to be good for customers because they're going to save time and money. So I think that's very exciting. And I think another thing that we might see, as e-commerce steps up to fill supply gaps around the country, I can imagine seeing hubs opening up countrywide for e-commerce delivery, which will make it much more, bring down the delivery costs in a big way and the delivery speeds in a big way.
It is quite dependent on other industries as well.
Yeah.
So is there an industry that you think should step up a bit, or that more needs to be done?
I mean, the one big enabler for the digital world, full stop, and by the way, for sort of mental health and everything else, is the telecom industry. And the price of data remains a big barrier for many people. The number of people that are sort of actively online internet users, is much smaller than the number of people that have access to it. And so, working on the price of data will be a huge enabler for the e-commerce industry and the digital economy more generally.
Thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you.
Well, that is Sam Shpat, that is the CEO of Jumia Kenya, just giving us an insight on how the industry is performing right now and the hopes for the future beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Betty Kiptum. Thank you. Well, that is a conversation I had earlier with Sam Shpat, the CEO of Jumia Kenya, on matters the e-commerce industry and how it is performing now. We hope you've got something now. Moving on to other news, entrepreneurs are embracing opportunities created by the COVID-19 pandemic to meet demand for new protective products. One such entrepreneur is Nanyuki-based Edith McKenna, who has shifted from making natural beauty products to mass production of sanitizers.
The challenge brought by COVID-19 has brought opportunities to innovative entrepreneurs who are now stepping in to support efforts in the fight against the spread of the deadly virus. Rivertex was amongst the first institutions to shift their production lines from making textile to face masks. Textile firms based at Athi River export processing zones are shifting from making clothes for the export market to face masks. In addition, Kenya Pipeline Company started making hand sanitizers using ethanol. Now private firms are also embracing opportunities created by the COVID-19 pandemic. One such farm in Nanyuki is a mini industry that has halted production of personal grooming products in favor of sanitizers, whose demand has shot up over the last 1 month after Kenya confirmed the first COVID-19 case.
We saw there's a need in the market, and us being now in the natural skincare products, we thought of a way of coming up with a more natural way of producing these sanitizers.
She says after her products were certified by the Kenya Bureau of Standards, demand has been high, prompting her to increase production capacity and the number of employees.
But now with the help of this mixing machine, now we can be able to do like now we just did 40 liters in around 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes. It's just the packaging now that is happening. And so now we are able to meet the demand that is there because these outlets that I'm talking about, you have people who are always constantly asking for the same. And we are happy for the demand that it has. And
the entrepreneur says she has leveraged the Laikipia County Government Innovation Program to secure contacts for her business.
Ours is made with natural herbs, which we use, the essential oils. So, and the herbs that we use are actually good for building or supporting somebody's immune system. So I'm talking about a combination of around 8 essential oils.
Fiona Shuru for Channel 1 Business News.
Across borders now, the Central Bank of Nigeria anticipates economic damage owing to the vigilance required under the COVID-19 pandemic to mitigate emerging risks in the banking system. The International Monetary Fund has further warned that Nigeria's economy falls into the category of economies that could be hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Here are the details of these and other stories from the African continent.
The International Monetary Fund has advised Nigeria's federal and state governments to roll out more fiscal measures to fight the virus. IMF Director, Africa Department, Abebe Selassie said that while the medium-term focus for Nigeria's federal government would be revenue mobilization, the immediate focus now should be how to deploy resources to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Selassie's remarks were echoed by the Central Bank of Nigeria that has called on the banking sector to enhance vigilance as measures against risks that may hit the sector. The Central Bank of Nigeria is urging banks and financial institutions to, amongst other things, restructure loans, existing borrowers and provide liquidity backstops as and when required to safeguard the financial system. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe realized a budget surplus of almost $1 billion in the month of December 2019. Zimbabwe's finance minister says there was a budget surplus of $984 million against a targeted surplus of $541 million. The records state that the total revenue collection for the month of December 2019 was $5 billion against a target of $3.4 billion. Finally, as campaign mounts on the high debt scene on African states, the International Monetary Fund has approved immediate debt service relief for Gambia among 18 other African vulnerable countries in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. While the measures announced offer breathing space for an initial period of 6 months, it forms a wide enough gap allowing financial resources to be channeled towards other pressing sectors. Other countries to benefit from the relief are Guinea, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, and Mali.
Further afield, the International Monetary Fund has suggested the UK and the EU should extend the period to negotiate a post-Brexit trade deal. Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva, when asked what she thought about the prospect of no trade deal this year and no extension to talks, said that because of the unprecedented uncertainty arising from the pandemic, it would be wise not to add more on top of it. Here are the details of these and others from across the borders.
The International Monetary Fund chief had expressed her backing for the deal struck by Boris Johnson's team last autumn, having warned that no-deal Brexit then would hit the UK economy by up to 5%. The UK government chose to put into law a refusal to trigger provisions to extend the Brexit implementation phase beyond the end of the year. That means without a deal, the UK and EU would trade on World Trade Organization terms, including significant new taxes and checks on trade from the beginning of next year. Yesterday, both the UK and EU announced a curtailed timetable to carry out 3 negotiation rounds by video conferencing. Meanwhile, Apple has released a smaller iPhone priced at $399, cutting the starting price for the company's smartphone line in a move to broaden its appeal to budget-conscious customers as the coronavirus hobbles the global economy. The lower-cost model could also attract more customers to Apple services, a growing driver of revenue. The iPhone SE is the second generation of a previous value model, the $449 iPhone 8, which will be retired. The iPhone SE lacks 5G capability and Apple's facial recognition system to unlock the device, instead relying on a fingerprint sensor similar to older models. The cheaper phone enters a cutthroat market for value phones, especially in China, where Apple derives about 17% of sales. Finally, some clothing factories in Gaza Strip have shifted their production lines to produce masks and protective suits, the market demand for which has surged along with the widespread of COVID-19 pandemic. The Unipal clothing company, which used to employ 100 tailors, has now become one of the most active factories in the Gaza Strip. It modified its production facility to make protective masks. In 2 weeks, the number of workers in the factory has doubled to 200. The global spread of COVID-19 has become an opportunity to revive the factories in this coastal enclave after these Gazian-made masks obtained medical approval in Israel. Factories in Gaza can now produce 20,000 masks and 2,000 protective suits a day in total.
Let's now get the sport. Nairobi Dandora Stadium Management Committee has asked the Nairobi County and national governments to consider completing construction works in the stadium that have stalled since last year. The committee, which conducted an inspection tour at the stadium, has said that materials that have not been installed have started to wear and tear, including artificial turf, with fears that more materials will wear and tear, especially during the rainy season if action is not taken. The 12,000-seat capacity stadium was launched last year by Nairobi County Governor Mike Sonko in a move that was geared towards helping youth showcase and nurture their talents and help to stop the use of drugs and substance abuse and crime. Now, Premier League clubs will discuss the option of putting a 30th June deadline on the 2019-2020 season at a meeting this Friday. Not all clubs have been involved in informal discussions at this stage, but with a hope for May resumption to the season unlikely, club owners are looking at how to avoid potentially difficult contractual situations. That brings us to an end of Business Insight this evening. Many thanks for your company. Coming up is O'Brien Kimani with an interview on how to increase the forest cover in the country. My name is Betty Kiptum. Lucy Moura has been my colleague on sign language interpretation. Thank you for your company. Good night.